Jake Morris sat in the corner of the cantina on Nexus Station, nursing his third drink of the evening. The amber liquid burned going down, but it did nothing to ease the pain in his chest. 6 months had passed since his sister Lisa disappeared, and every lead had turned into a dead end. Every contact had gone quiet. Every favor had been called in with nothing to show for it. The cantina was filled with the usual crowd of smugglers, bounty hunters, and traders from across the galaxy. Jake had been to dozens of places just like this one, asking the same questions, getting the same blank stares and shrugged shoulders. Nobody had seen a human girl with brown hair and green eyes. Nobody knew anything about the Hegemony Syndicate. Nobody wanted to get involved. Jake was about to leave when the bartender leaned across the bar toward him. Quarks was a Centaurian with 4 arms and skin like old leather. He had been working this cantina for 20 years and had heard every story the galaxy had to offer. "You're still looking for your sister, human?" Quarks asked in his gravelly voice. Jake nodded. "Lisa Morris, 19 years old. Taken from our colony 6 months ago by slavers." Quarks looked around the cantina nervously before speaking again. "There might be someone who knows something, but you won't like the price." "I've got credits," Jake said quickly. "This isn't about credits," Quarks replied. "This is about your life." The bartender poured himself a drink and downed it in one gulp. "Ever heard of the Crimson Widow?" Jake shook his head. The name meant nothing to him. "She runs a ship called the Nightfall out in the Shattered Nebula. Real exclusive place. Only the richest and most powerful beings in the galaxy can afford to visit her. Crime bosses, warlords, corrupt politicians. They all go to her when they want something special." "What kind of special?" Jake asked. Quarks's 4 hands trembled slightly as he cleaned a glass. "She makes deals. Spend 1 night on her ship, and if you survive until dawn, she gives you whatever you want most in the galaxy. Anything at all. Information, wealth, power, revenge. She can get it all." "Sounds too good to be true," Jake said. "That's because of the other part," Quarks continued. "In 300 years, nobody has ever survived a night with her. They go in alive and come out as dried-up husks. She feeds on them somehow, drains the life right out of their bodies." Jake felt his blood run cold. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because 6 months ago, the Hegemony Syndicate tried to muscle in on her territory. They sent a whole fleet to take over her operation. 3 days later, every ship in that fleet was found drifting in space with nothing but empty uniforms inside. No bodies, no blood, just clothes floating in the void." The bartender leaned closer. "If anyone knows what happened to the people the Hegemony was holding, it would be her. But Jake, she's not human. She's not even close to human. The stories say she's something ancient and hungry that wears a beautiful face to luring victims." Jake stared into his drink. "What does she look like?" "Different things to different people, they say, but always beautiful, always perfect, and always deadly." Quarks shuddered. "They call her Velara Kane, but nobody knows if that's her real name. Some say she's been alive for thousands of years. Some say she's not alive at all. How much does it cost to see her?" Jake asked. 1 million galactic credits just to step foot on her ship. That's if she even agrees to see you. She's picky about her clients." Jake did the math in his head. If he sold his ship, his cargo, and everything else he owned, he might be able to scrape together that much money. It would leave him with nothing but the clothes on his back. "You're thinking about it," Quarks said. "I can see it in your eyes." "Don't do it, Jake. Find another way to get your sister back." "There is no other way," Jake replied. "I've tried everything else." He finished his drink and stood up. "Where can I find her?" Quarks sighed and pulled out a datapad. "The Shattered Nebula, Sector 7. But you'll need a ship that can handle the sensor interference out there. Most navigation systems go crazy in that region. I can handle it, Jake said. Jake, listen to me. I've been tending bar for 20 years. I've seen tough guys, smart guys, guys with more firepower than a battle cruiser. They all thought they were special. They all thought they could be the first to survive. Every single one of them ended up dead. Jake looked at the bartender. What makes her so dangerous? Nobody knows for sure. The few people who have seen the inside of her ship and lived to tell about it say the place is like a nightmare made real. Walls that bleed, rooms that change shape, voices of the dead calling. Out from the shadows. And that's before you even meet her. But she keeps her bargains? Jake asked. Every single time. If you somehow make it to Dawn, she gives you exactly what you asked for. The problem is that Dawn never comes for her guests. Jake pulled out his credit chip and paid for his drinks. Thanks for the information, Corks. Where are you going? The bartender asked. To sell everything I own, Jake replied. If Lisa is still alive, this might be my only chance to find her. As Jake walked toward the door, Corks called out after him. Jake, wait. There's one more thing you should know. Jake turned around. The stories say that she doesn't just kill you. She makes you suffer first. She feeds on fear and pain as much as she feeds on life. Whatever she shows you, whatever she does to you, it will be designed to break your mind before she breaks your body. Jake nodded grimly. I understand. No, you don't, Corks said. Nobody ever does until it's too late. Jake left the cantina and walked through the crowded corridors of Nexus Station. Around him, beings from 100 different worlds went about their business. Traders haggled over cargo prices, mercenaries looked for work, and travelers searched for passage to distant stars. All of them had problems, but none of them had a sister who might be suffering somewhere in the darkness of space. That he made his way to the docking bay where his ship waited. The Lucky Strike wasn't much to look at, but she had been his home for the past 5 years. Now he would have to give her up for a chance to save Lisa. Pete Sullivan, his crewmate and oldest friend, was waiting for him by the ship's ramp. Where have you been? Pete asked. I've been looking all over for you. Getting information, Jake replied. I think I found a lead. He told Pete about the Crimson Widow and watched his friend's face go pale. You can't be serious, Pete said. Jake, that's suicide. It's the only option I have left. There has to be another way. Jake shook his head. I've been searching for 6 months, Pete. Every trail has gone cold. This is it. Pete grabbed Jake's arm. Listen to me. Lisa wouldn't want you to die for her. And I won't want to live if I... Don't try to save her, Jake replied. He walked up the ramp into his ship, knowing it might be the last time he ever set foot aboard the Lucky Strike. Tomorrow, he would begin the process of selling everything he owned to buy a chance at finding his sister. It might kill him, but at least he would finally have an answer about what happened to Lisa Morris. Jake's small transport ship shook violently as it entered the shattered nebula. The sensor readings flickered and jumped wildly, showing phantom objects that weren't there and missing real asteroids that could crush his hull. This region of space was known for driving pilots insane, with its strange effects on navigation equipment. He had spent 2 weeks selling everything he owned to raise the money for this meeting. The Lucky Strike was gone, sold to a Martian cargo company. His personal belongings, his tools, even his father's old watch had all been converted to credits. Pete had begged him not to go through with it, but Jake had made up his mind. The coordinates Corks had given him led to an empty patch of space that looked no different from any other part of the nebula. Jake was beginning to think he had been cheated when his proximity alarm suddenly screamed. A massive ship materialized out of nowhere, as if it had been invisible just moments before. The nightfall was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The hull was black as deep space, but somehow seemed to absorb light rather than simply reflecting it. Crimson lines ran along its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The ship was easily 10 times the size of any pleasure craft Jake had encountered, more like a mobile city than a simple vessel. His communication system crackled to life without him touching any controls. "Jake Morris," a woman's voice said. The sound was beautiful, but carried an undertone that made his skin crawl. "I have been expecting you. You're Velara Kane." Jake asked, "I am many things to many people. You may call me Velara if it pleases you. Dock with Bay 7 and come aboard. Leave your weapons behind. You will not need them where you are going." Jake followed the docking instructions and found himself in a bay that seemed far too large to fit inside the ship he had seen from outside. The walls pulsed with a faint red light that reminded him uncomfortably of a heartbeat. As soon as his transport touched down, the bay door sealed shut with a sound like a tomb closing. A woman was waiting for him at the bottom of his ship's ramp. Jake's first thought was that she was the most beautiful person he had ever seen, and his second thought was that something was terribly wrong with that beauty. Her skin was pale as moonlight and seemed to glow with its own inner light. Her hair was long and dark, moving slightly in air currents that Jake couldn't feel. But it was her eyes that made him want to run back to his ship. They shifted color as he watched, from green to amber to deep red. "Welcome aboard the Nightfall, Jake Morris," she said, extending a hand. "I am Velara Kane." Jake shook her hand, and immediately regretted it. Her skin was cold as ice, and the contact sent shivers up his arm. For just a moment, he felt something brush against his mind, like invisible fingers rifling through his thoughts. "Interesting," she murmured. "You are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Jake asked. "Most humans who seek me out are driven by greed or ambition. You are driven by love." "How refreshing." She smiled, showing teeth that were just a little too sharp. "Come, let me show you to your quarters." She led him through corridors that seemed to stretch on forever. The walls were covered in what looked like living tissue, pulsing gently with that same red light. Jake could hear whispers coming from behind the walls, voices speaking in languages he didn't recognize. "Are there other guests aboard?" he asked. "In a manner of speaking," Velara replied. "The Nightfall is home to all those who have accepted my hospitality over the years." They passed other figures in the corridors, but Jake couldn't quite focus on them properly. They seemed to flicker in and out of existence, like images on a broken screen. One of them, a tall figure in what might have been military uniform, turned toward Jake as they passed. "Run," the figure whispered. "Run while you still can." Velara glanced back at the figure with annoyance. "Please ignore my other guests. They can be quite traumatic." Jake's room was luxurious beyond anything he had ever experienced. The bed was large enough for 6 people and covered in silk sheets that felt like liquid against his skin. The walls were lined with shelves containing books, artwork, and artifacts from across the galaxy. A large window looked out into space, showing the swirling colors of the nebula. "The rules are simple," Velara said, settling into a chair that hadn't been there moments before. "From sunset to sunrise on Galactic Standard Time, you remain aboard my ship. During that time, I will test you in ways that will push you beyond your limits. If you break, if you beg for death, if you attempt to leave, you join my collection of permanent guests." She gestured toward the window, where Jake could now see faces pressed against the glass from outside. Their mouths moved silently, as if they were screaming. "If you survive until dawn," she continued, "I will grant you whatever your heart desires most. In your case, I believe that would be information about your sister Lisa." Jake's blood went cold, How do you know about Lisa? I know many things, Jake Morris. I know that she was taken by the Hegemony Syndicate while you were away on a cargo run. I know that you blame yourself for not being there to protect her. I know that guilt is eating you alive from the inside. She stood and walked to the window, her reflection not appearing in the glass. I also know where she is being held, who ordered her capture, and exactly how you could rescue her. All of this information can be yours if you simply survive one night. And if I don't survive? Jake asked. Valara turned back to him, and for a moment her beautiful face seemed to flicker, showing something else beneath. Something with too many. Eyes and teeth like broken glass. Then you become another voice in my walls, she said. Another face at my windows. Another soul to keep me company through the long centuries. The lights in the room suddenly dimmed, and Jake realized the galactic sunset had begun. The testing starts now, Valara said. I suggest you prepare yourself. The room around Jake began to change. The walls started to bleed, thick red liquid seeping through cracks that appeared in the surface. The whispers from the corridors grew, louder, becoming screams of agony and despair. The window showed not the nebula, but scenes of destruction and death from across the galaxy. Your first test is simple, Valara said, her voice now coming from everywhere at once. Watch. The window changed again, and Jake saw his sister Lisa chained to a wall in a dark cell. She was thin and dirty, her clothes torn and her face bruised. A figure in a black hood stood over her with a glowing rod that crackled with electricity. Please, Lisa's voice echoed through the room. I don't know anything. Just let me go home. The hooded figure raised the rod, and Lisa screamed as electricity coursed through her body. Jake lunged toward the window, but his hands passed through it like water. Stop it, he shouted. Leave her alone. This is happening right now, Jake. Valara's voice whispered in his ear. While you stand here safely aboard my ship, your sister is being tortured. Every second you waste here is another second of her suffering. The scene played over and over, each time showing Lisa in more pain. More desperate, more broken. Jake pounded on the walls, screamed at Valara to stop the visions, tried to find a way out of the room. But there was no escape. How does it feel? Valara asked, materializing beside him. How does it feel to be helpless while someone you love suffers? Jake stopped fighting and turned to look at her. Is this really happening right now? Does it matter? She replied. This is what you fear most. This is what keeps you awake at night. The knowledge that while you search for her, she might be experiencing exactly what you just witnessed. You're right, Jake said quietly. This is what I'm afraid of. Valara looked surprised. Most of her guests spent this first test screaming and begging, not calmly agreeing with her. But fear isn't going to help me save her, Jake continued. If you know where she is, then I need to. Survive your tests to get that information. Breaking down now won't accomplish anything. He sat down on the bed and looked directly at Valara. What's the next test? For the first time in centuries, Valara Kane didn't quite know what to do with a guest. This human was reacting in ways she had never encountered before. Instead of being driven mad by his fears, he was analyzing them. Instead of fighting uselessly against her power, he was accepting the situation and adapting to it. You are either very brave or very stupid, she said. Probably both, Jake replied. But right now, stupidity and bravery are all I have left. The room continued to shift and change around them, but Jake kept his attention focused on Valara. He had a feeling that surviving this night would require him to understand his tormentor as much as it required him to resist her tests. The room around Jake twisted into new shapes as Valara prepared her second test. The walls stretched impossibly high, forming a vast chamber filled with floating platforms. Each platform showed a different scene from Jake's life, but wrong somehow, distorted into nightmare versions of his memories. "Tell me about your childhood, Jake Morris," Velara said, her voice echoing from above. "Tell me about the farm where you grew up." Jake looked up at the platforms and saw his family's farm, but the crops were withered and black. The house where he had spent his youth was falling apart, its windows dark and broken. His parents stood in the fields, but their faces were hollow and accusing. "We worked ourselves to death for you," his father's voice boomed across the chamber. "We gave everything so you could have a better life. And what did you do? You ran away to space and left your sister alone. You were supposed to protect her," his mother added. "She was your responsibility, and you failed." On another platform, Jake saw himself as a teenager, arguing with his parents about leaving the farm. But in this version, his words were cruel and hateful. He watched himself say things he had never said, hurt the people who loved him in ways he had never done. "This isn't how it happened," Jake said calmly. "Isn't it?" Velara appeared beside him, her form flickering between beautiful woman and something with too many limbs. "Didn't you abandon your family to chase dreams of adventure among the stars? Didn't you leave your little sister behind?" "I left to make money," Jake replied. "The farm was failing. If I hadn't started working cargo runs, we would have lost everything." Lisa understood that, did she? Velara waved her hand, and a new platform appeared. This one showed Lisa at age 16, crying alone in her room. She told me a different story when I spoke with her. Jake felt his heart skip a beat. "You've talked to Lisa?" "Oh, yes." She had many interesting things to say about her big brother, how he promised to take care of her and then disappeared for months at a time, how she felt abandoned and alone while he played spaceman. The platform showed Lisa talking to someone off screen, her voice filled with bitterness. Jake thinks he's the hero, saving the family farm. But really, he just wanted an excuse to leave. He never cared about me. Jake watched the scene carefully, studying every detail. "When did you record this?" "Does it matter?" Velara asked. "It matters because Lisa never talked like that. She never used the word spaceman because she knew how much I hated it. And look at her clothes. She's wearing the blue dress Mom made for her 17th birthday. But you said this was when she was 16. Velara's beautiful face flickered with annoyance. "You are missing the point of the test." "No, I'm not," Jake said. "The point is to make me feel guilty and hopeless. But I already feel guilty about leaving Lisa alone. I don't need fake memories to know that I failed to protect her. The question is, what am I going to do about it now?" The platforms around them began to spin faster, showing more distorted memories. Jake as a child, cruel to other kids. Jake as a young man, breaking promises and hurting people. Jake as a cargo pilot, caring more about money than family. "Look at what you really are," Velara hissed. "Look at the selfish, cruel person behind the hero mask." Jake studied each scene carefully. "These are well made," he said. "Whoever created them knows a lot about human psychology. But they made mistakes. In that scene where I'm 8 years old, I'm wearing shoes that weren't invented until I was 12. And there's my father using a tool that we didn't buy until after I left home." "You're deflecting," Velara said. "No, I'm paying attention," Jake replied. "Look, I know I'm not perfect. I know I made mistakes. I should have found a way to take Lisa with me or stayed home and found local work. But beating myself up about past decisions won't help me save her now." The spinning platform suddenly stopped and the chamber fell silent. Velara stared at Jake with an expression he couldn't read. "You are not reacting correctly," she said. "How am I supposed to react? You should be screaming. You should be begging me to stop. You should be promising me anything I want if I just make the pain go away." Jake shrugged. "The pain isn't going away whether I scream or not. Lisa is still missing either way. If I'm going to suffer through this night, I might as well try to learn something useful. Learn something? Alara sounded genuinely confused. About you. About how your powers work. About what kind of being you really are. Jake sat down on one of the platforms and looked directly at her. For instance, you can create realistic illusions, but you have trouble with fine details. You can read surface thoughts, but you miss deeper emotional contexts. And you're getting frustrated because I'm not responding the way your other victims did. They were not victims, Alara snapped. They were clients who failed to meet the terms of our agreement. What was the longest anyone ever lasted? Jake asked. What does that matter? I'm curious. In 300 years, what's the record for survival time? Velara was quiet for a long moment. 14 hours. A draconian warlord named Kha'Zix the Destroyer. He had conquered 17 star systems and commanded fleets of 1 million ships. What broke him? I showed him his own mortality. I made him experience his death over and over until he begged me to make it permanent. Jake nodded thoughtfully. And the others? Most last only a few hours. Some break within minutes. She studied Jake with renewed interest. You have been here for 6 hours and have not even attempted to fight back or escape. Fighting won't help, and there's nowhere to escape to, Jake said. Besides, you're not actually trying to kill me yet. This is all psychological warfare. All? Valara's form shifted, becoming more monstrous. Tentacles writhed where her arms should be, and her eyes multiplied across her face. You think this is not real? I think you're very good at making things look scary, Jake said. But if you wanted me dead, I'd already be dead. This is a test, remember? You want to see how long I can hold out. The monster form melted away, revealing Valara's beautiful human appearance again. But now she looked at Jake with something that might have been respect. You are unlike anyone who has ever come aboard my ship, she said. I'm just a cargo pilot looking for his sister, Jake replied. Nothing special about that. There is something special about it, Valara said quietly. Do you know what most of my clients want? Power, wealth, revenge against their enemies. They come to me because they think they deserve more than they have, and I just want my family back. Yes, she moved closer to him, and Jake noticed that. Her footsteps made no sound. Tell me about her. Tell me about Lisa. Why do you want to know? Indulge me. We have many hours left until dawn. Jake thought about his sister. She's smart. Smarter than me, actually. She was planning to study engineering at the Colonial University before the slavers took her. She wanted to design better farming equipment for frontier worlds. Go on. She has this laugh that can make anyone smile, even when they're having the worst day of their lives, and she's stubborn as hell. When she decides she wants something, she doesn't give up until she gets it. Valara listened with an expression that was almost hunger, but different from the predatory look she had worn earlier. She sounds remarkable, Valara said. She is. That's why I have to find her. Even if it costs you your life? Especially if it costs me my life, Jake said. What good is living if I abandon the people I love? Valara was quiet for a long time, studying Jake's face. Around them, the nightmare chamber began to fade, returning to the luxurious room where they had started. You speak of love as if it were a form of strength, she said finally. Isn't it? Most beings I encounter see love as weakness. Something that can be exploited. Something that makes them vulnerable. Jake shook his head. Love is what makes everything else worth doing. Without it, power and wealth and revenge are just empty games. Empty games, Valara repeated softly. Yes, I suppose they are. She sat down across from him, and for the first time since he had boarded her ship, she looked almost human, almost vulnerable. "Tell me, Jake Morris," she said. "What do you think I am?" Jake studied her carefully. "Something very old and very lonely," he said. "Something that has forgotten what it feels like to care about another being." Velara's eyes widened in surprise. In 3 centuries of testing victims, no one had ever looked at her with anything but fear or hatred. This human was looking at her with something that might have been compassion. "You pity me," she said. "I understand you," Jake replied. "At least I think I do. Explain." "You feed on fear and pain because you've forgotten how to feel anything else. You surround yourself with the remnants of people you've destroyed because you're afraid of being completely alone. And you keep testing beings like me because you're hoping that someday someone will prove that there's still something in the universe worth caring about." Velara stared at him in stunned silence. For the first time in centuries, someone had seen past her beautiful mask and monstrous powers to the broken being underneath. "You don't know anything about me," she whispered. "Maybe not," Jake said. "But I know what it feels like to be afraid of losing the only thing that matters to you." Outside the window, the first pale light of dawn was still hours away. But something had changed in the space between them, something that neither of them fully understood yet. The ship around them had grown quiet. The whispers in the walls had faded to barely audible murmurs, and the pulsing red light had dimmed to a soft glow. Jake noticed that the faces at the window had stopped their silent screaming and were now simply watching with expressions of curiosity. Velara sat across from him in silence, her shifting eyes now settled on a deep blue that reminded Jake of Earth's oceans. For the first time since he had come aboard, she looked genuinely uncertain. "I was not always like this," she said finally. "I was mortal once, long ago. What happened?" Jake asked. "I trusted someone who betrayed me." Her voice was so quiet, he had to lean forward to hear her. "I was young and foolish, and believed that love could conquer anything. I was wrong." She waved her hand, and the window showed not space, but a world of green forests and silver cities. Jake saw a younger version of Velara, walking through gardens with a man whose face seemed to shift and blur. His name was Marcus, and he was everything I thought I wanted. Handsome, charming, powerful. He promised me eternal life together, but he failed to mention that eternity can be a form of hell. The scene in the window changed. Jake watched as the man Marcus revealed his true form, something with too many teeth and eyes like burning coals. He saw Velara's transformation, watched her beautiful mortal form twist into something that could feed on life itself. "He made me into what he was," she continued, "a creature that could only sustain itself by draining the essence from other beings. But then he abandoned me, said that I was no longer interesting now that I was like him." "How long ago was this?" Jake asked. 3,000 years, give or take a century. Time becomes meaningless when you have too much of it. Jake tried to imagine living for 3,000 years, watching civilizations rise and fall, seeing everyone. You might care about age and die while you remained unchanged. "Why didn't you try to find others like yourself?" he asked. "I did, but creatures like Marcus and I, we are solitary by nature. We cannot trust each other because we know too well what we are capable of. And mortal beings fear us. Rightfully so. So you started the tests. At first, I simply fed when I was hungry. But that became boring after a few centuries. The tests began as a form of entertainment, a way to make the feeding more interesting. If someone could survive my trials, they would deserve to live. But no one ever did. No one ever could," Velara said bitterly. "I designed the tests to be impossible. I told myself it was fair, that I was giving them a chance, but really, I was just creating elaborate justifications for murder." Jake looked at her thoughtfully. "What changed tonight?" "You did." She met his eyes, and he saw something in them that might have been hope. You are the first person in 3,000 years to look at me and see something other than a monster. You are a monster, Jake said gently. But that doesn't mean you have to stay one. Velara laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. You think I can simply choose to become something else? You think redemption is possible for someone like me? I think you wouldn't have kept testing people for 3 centuries if you didn't hope that someone would eventually prove you wrong about the universe. The ship shuddered around them, and Jake realized it wasn't from any external force. Velara's emotional state was affecting the vessel itself. Tell me about the other guests, Jake said, gesturing toward the window where their faces still watched them. They are what remains of my clients, Velara said. Their bodies are gone, but their consciousness persists within the ship. They are aware, but trapped. Can you free them? Why would I do that? They are my companions, the only beings who understand what I have experienced. But they didn't choose to be your companions. They came here seeking something, and instead became prisoners. Velara was quiet for a long moment. I had not considered their perspective. What did you think they were feeling? Nothing. I assumed that once they were part of the ship, they would share my viewpoint, that they would understand why their sacrifice was necessary. Jake gestured toward the window. Look at their faces. Do they look like they understand? Velara turned to look at the trapped souls, really seeing them for the first time in centuries. Their expressions were not peaceful or understanding. They were afraid, confused, and desperate. They hate me, she whispered. They hate what you've done to them, Jake corrected. But hatred can be overcome if you're willing to try. How? Start by giving them a choice. Let them decide whether to stay or go. If I free them, I will be alone again. You're alone now, Jake pointed out. Being surrounded by people who are trapped here against their will isn't real companionship. Velara stood and walked to the window. She placed her hand against the glass, and one of the faces, a woman with kind eyes, pressed back from the other. Sighed. I'm sorry, Velara whispered. I'm so very sorry. The face in the window mouthed words that Jake couldn't hear, but he could see the forgiveness in the woman's expression. They understand loneliness too, Jake said. Most beings do. It's one of the things that connects us all, even humans. Especially humans. We're social creatures. We need connection with others to survive. That's why love is so important to us. Velara turned back to him. Is that why you risk everything for your sister? Because you need that connection? Partly. But also because she needs it too. Lisa is alone. The dawn light streaming through the window cast everything in a golden glow as Velara kept her part of the bargain. She moved to a console that materialized from the wall and began calling up information that made Jake's heart race. Your sister. Lisa is being held at Black Rock Station in the Kepler Void, Velara said. It is a prison facility run by the Hegemony Syndicate, specifically designed to hold valuable prisoners who might be useful for future negotiations or sales. Jake leaned forward eagerly. Is she hurt? She is alive and relatively unharmed. The Hegemony keeps their valuable prisoners in reasonable condition. She is being held in Cell Block 7, Level 3, Section 12. How many guards? Approximately 200 personnel on the station at any given time, but only about 30 in that section. The station has defensive shields and automated weapon systems, but it is not designed to withstand a serious military assault. Valara's fingers danced over the console, pulling up detailed schematics of the facility. Here are the guard rotations, the security protocols, and the best approach vectors for a small ship. Jake studied the information carefully. This is incredible. How do you know all this? The Hegemony was foolish enough to try to muscle in on my territory 6 months ago. Before I destroyed their fleet, I extracted considerable information from Their leadership. Your sister was mentioned in their records as a recent acquisition. Why did they take her specifically? She was selected because of her engineering background. The hegemony has been having problems with their prison security systems, and they needed someone with technical skills to fix them. Lisa was chosen because her isolated location made her an easy target, and her family situation meant that no one with significant resources would come looking for her. Jake felt anger flare in his chest. They were wrong about that. Yes, they were. Velara smiled, and for the first time it looked genuinely warm. They did not account for the possibility that her brother would be willing to bargain with the most dangerous being in the galaxy to save her. She transferred all the information to a datapad and handed it to Jake. Everything you need to plan a rescue mission is there. Guard schedules, security weaknesses, supply ship arrival times that could provide cover for your approach. Jake took the pad and stared at it. After 6 months of dead ends and false leads, he finally had real information about Lisa's location. But as he studied the schematics, he realized the scope of the challenge ahead. This is going to be nearly impossible, he said. Even with all this information, I'm just one person with a small ship. How am I supposed to assault a fortress and extract one prisoner? You are not going alone, Velara said quietly. Jake looked up at her. What do you mean? I meant what I said about joining me. We can rescue your sister together, and then we can decide what comes next. You would really help me? Jake, for 3,000 years I have done nothing but cause pain and death. The idea of actually saving someone, of using my abilities to help rather than harm, is more appealing than you can possibly imagine. Jake thought about her offer. Having Velara as an ally would certainly make the rescue much more feasible. Her ship was powerful enough to challenge the station's defenses, and her abilities could handle problems that normal tactics couldn't solve. But there was something else to consider. What about them? Jake asked, gesturing toward the window where the trapped souls still watched. What about them? You said you could free them. If we're going to be partners, if you're really going to change, shouldn't that be the first step? Velara looked at the faces in the window, many of whom were nodding eagerly at Jake's suggestion. If I free them, some of them will want revenge against me, she said. Some of them might try to stop us from rescuing your sister. Maybe. But keeping them trapped because you're afraid of the consequences doesn't sound like change to me. Velara was quiet for a long moment. You are asking me to risk everything on the hope that these beings will be capable of forgiveness. I'm asking you to do the right thing regardless of the consequences. That's what real change looks like. And if they try to kill me, then we'll deal with that when it happens. But Velara, if you want to become something other than a monster, you have to stop acting like one. She moved to the window and placed both hands against the glass. Are you sure about this? I'm sure that you'll never be free of your past until you give your victims a choice about their future. Velara closed her eyes, and Jake felt a strange vibration run through the ship. The faces in the window began to glow with soft light, and one by one they faded away. Around them, the walls stopped pulsing and the whispers fell silent. It is done, Velara said. They are free to go wherever they choose. How do you feel? Terrified, she admitted. For the first time in centuries, I do not know what will happen next. That's called being alive, Jake said with a smile. A new voice spoke from behind them. Thank you. They turned to see a translucent figure materializing in the room. It was the woman with kind eyes that Jake had seen at the window. She looked at Velara with an expression that was not hatred or fear, but something closer to pity. My name is Catherine Wells, she said. I was trapped here for 40 years. I remember you, Velara said quietly. You were looking for your husband. I found him, eventually. Not through your tests, but through what I learned while I was trapped here. He had died peacefully in his sleep, just a few months after I left to search for him. I'm sorry, Valara said. I know you are. I could feel your emotions changing over the past few hours. This human has had quite an effect on you. Catherine turned to Jake. What you did tonight was remarkable. Not just surviving her tests, but helping her remember what it means to care about someone other than herself. I just told the truth, Jake said. Sometimes that's the most powerful thing anyone can do. Catherine looked back at Valara. I forgive you. Not because what you did was right, but because holding on to anger would only continue the cycle of pain. Where will you go now? Valara asked. Some of us will move on to whatever comes after life. Others will stay to help you learn how to use your abilities for good instead of evil. The choice is ours now, and that makes all the difference. Catherine began to fade away, but before she disappeared completely, she spoke one last time. Take care of each other. Both of you have more healing to do than you realize. Jake and Valara stood alone in the room as the sun fully rose outside the window. The nightfall felt different now, less like a predator's lair and more like a ship that might actually go somewhere. So, Jake said, ready to go save my sister? Yes, Valara said. But Jake, I want you to understand that I am not suddenly good because I freed my prisoners. I am still dangerous, still struggling with impulses that have controlled me for millennia. This partnership will not be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is, Jake replied. But Valara, you've spent 3,000 years believing that you are incapable of change. Maybe it's time to find out what you're actually capable of when you're trying to build something instead of destroy it. She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. You know, I think I would like to meet your sister. You'll like her. She's stubborn and smart, and she doesn't give up on people, even when they give up on themselves. She sounds like her brother. Jake laughed. Yeah, we Morris. Kids are pretty persistent. As the nightfall turned toward the Kepler void and the rescue mission ahead, Jake realized that he had gained something far more valuable than just information about Lisa's location. He had found an ally who understood what it meant to lose everything and fight to get it back. For the first time in 6 months, he felt genuinely hopeful about the future. Lisa was still trapped, still in danger, but she was no longer alone. Help was coming, and it was bringing the most unlikely rescue team in the galaxy. The Crimson Widow was dead, but Valara Kane was finally ready to discover who she could become. When she chose love over fear, hope over despair, and life over death. Together, she and Jake would write a new story, one that began with saving a young woman named Lisa Morris and had no predetermined ending. That uncertainty, Jake thought, was the most human thing of all.